Welcome back, subbies, or welcome to our channel. If you are new, I am Sherry, and welcome to Talk on This. Guys, if you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button. Also, hit the notification bell for more videos just like this. Leave us a comment. We love comments on this channel, and also give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this episode today. All right, let's get right into it. Today, I want to talk on marijuana. Should it be legalized? Is this progressive governance? Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk on this. Many nations and countries have legalized marijuana. Globally, this seems to be the growing trend. So, why is this now becoming so popular in our world today? In fact, in the United States, 38 of the 50 United States have legalized marijuana for medical use, and 24 of the 50 states have legalized marijuana for recreational use. But you have the trend of smaller countries like the smaller CARICOM, the countries, the Caribbean community countries, now following this trend. And is this beneficial for the smaller countries to follow this trend? I want to take a look at that a little later, but first let's look at the difference between legalization and decriminalization of a drug. Many countries are opting to decriminalize marijuana instead of legalizing it. So what's the big difference? Legalization of a drug removes all penalties for possession and personal use of a drug, while decriminalization, the penalties apply for use and possession of the drug, but there are no criminal charges. So with decriminalization, you just have to basically pay a fine, like with a traffic ticket, for example. So is that basically still legal? Possibly, but yet there's still a fine. Big whoop. Anyway, let's look at what this drug really is. What is marijuana actually, and how does it affect the body? Let's take a look. Cannabis, also known as marijuana or weed or ganja or herb, is a psychoactive drug from the cannabis plant. Now, cannabis is native to Central and South Asia, and cannabis can be used by smoking, vaping, within food, or as an extract. Cannabis has various mental and physical effects, which include euphoria, altered states of mind, and altered states of time, or altered sense of time, difficulty concentrating, impaired short-term memory, impaired body movements, relaxation, and an increase in appetite. At high doses, mental effects can include anxiety, delusions, hallucinations, panic, paranoia, and psychosis. So this drug can be very dangerous in the wrong hands if used incorrectly and if abused. And this is important, as you will see as we continue. The Federal Controlled Substances Act classifies drugs into schedules. Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, currently, marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug at federal level. In this determines it to have a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use, actually prohibiting its use for any purpose. Now, this has been questioned, and rightly so, because marijuana does have a medical purpose. And on May 1st, 2024, the Associated Press reported on federal plans to actually change marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug. Okay, well, let's look at Schedule 3 drugs. What are Schedule 3 drugs? Now, these drugs have a high potential, or have a potential for abuse, less than drugs in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Now, what's concerning, though, is abuse of the drug, they say, may lead to moderate to low physical dependence or high psychological dependence. And I think this is concerning because studies have shown that marijuana actually it has a high potential for misuse that can lead to severe psychological and physical dependence. And this is actually what Schedule 2 drugs are. these drugs in Schedule 2 have a high potential for misuse that can lead to severe psychological and physical dependence. And I think and I believe from research that this is where marijuana should be scheduled. So let's hope they reconsider where they schedule marijuana, because and Schedule 2 drugs can also be prescribed by a doctor. Now, just to get off marijuana for a minute, Xanax, Volume, um, these are actually Schedule 4 drugs, and I think these should also be Schedule 2 drugs, because there's been a growing concern of the abuse of Xanax right now, the high dependency on Xanax in society, and this should actually be rescheduled, I feel, along with marijuana as Schedule 2 drugs. Xanax, like I mentioned, is a Schedule 4 drug, and Schedule 4 drugs are defined as drugs with a low potential for abuse and a low risk of dependence. And this is obviously not so right now with Xanax. So hopefully they will reschedule these two, um, and we'll see what happens. But and I want to get more into what marijuana actually is. Let's look at this plant and see what it actually is. But we have to realize that alcohol is a big problem in society today. This was made legal, and people have abused this privilege. Now we have marijuana that's becoming legalized and decriminalized in society at a rapid pace. And imagine this along with alcohol for recreational use. We are becoming a society that is not of sober mind. Ephesians 5:8 says, "And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit." What is dissipation? Dissipation is overindulgence in sensual pleasures, dissipated living. This type of living will not get you into the kingdom of heaven, and Scripture teaches us this. But yet we are being filled with a society that is not of sober mind, but they are living um, uh, to please the body, the flesh, and they are overindulging in sensual pleasures. And guys, let's take a look at this plant and let's see what component causes people to want to abuse this drug, abuse this plant, sorry, and actually make it into something that seems to be detrimental to our society. The cannabis plant, also known as marijuana, is also the hemp plant. So the hemp is derived from the same cannabis plant, but hemp has less than 0.3% of THC, and THC is tetrahydrocannabinol. It's the main psychoactive component of the cannabis plant, um, which is one of the 483 known components in this plant, including at least 65 other cannabinoids. Now, hemp won't get you high because it doesn't have that psychoactive component, but it is used for skin problems, rosacea, eczema. It's good for the heart. It's good for inflammation in the body. A lot of people use it in smoothies. So it is a good thing to take. It has very beneficial properties. Um, but the THC, which is the main psychoactive component, is what many people want from this plant. Now, THC is derived from CBGA, which is cannabigerolic acid. This is the main component of the marijuana plant, and this acid is actually converted into CBG, which is cannabigerol, and it's used for energy, mental clarity. This won't get you high, but many people use this cannabinoid for energy, so they can use it in a certain form, maybe an oil or a powder. You have another cannabinoid, which is CBC. This is actually used to maintain, encourage, and enhance brain cells. So this is actually improves health as well. CBD, which is cannabidiol. It's actually used for anxiety. It's used to help you sleep. It's used for pain, inflammation. So these cannabinoids won't get you high, but these are actually good from the cannabis plant to help with pain and inflammation and anxiety, sleep, and also to improve energy in the brain. So it's good for the body. But the THC is what many people want the marijuana for. They want to get that high feeling. But you have to be so careful because THC now, there's so many strains of marijuana. The marijuana has can go anywhere from 15% to 30% THC. So the marijuana today is not the marijuana of yesterday. The strains are becoming more potent, and that's why societies who encourage marijuana for medical use and for recreational use have to be so very careful in what strains are being cultivated or being sold and are used for recreational use or medical use. So it takes a lot of research, but many people aren't into that. They're just into, okay, let's just allow this into our society. But they have to be so very careful with what strains they are allowing to in.
Another thing you're not going to hear at the dispensary, the THC brownies may be stronger than they appear. That's because, as with any business, these guys have competition. They're constantly trying to cultivate better, more potent strains of cannabis, and they're pretty good at it. The stuff being sold today has ridiculously high levels of THC compared with the stuff in circulation 40 years ago. And since it's illegal at the federal level, the quality and the strength of the product are totally unregulated.
CBN is another form of, it's called cannabinol. It's actually all weed, basically. Many people, they would take all weed and they would fall asleep, and sometimes you can't wake these people up. So you have to be careful on how long you keep your cannabis and without using it, and because you can actually become very drowsy and toxic, very sleepy, and you can take this and you may be driving or working, and you have to be so very careful. And this is what we have to be aware of in society when we allow this into our society. But I want you to take a look first of this video. It's of this Israeli professor who studied and researched marijuana and the different strains and how it affects the body. But take a look at this real quick and we'll get back and talk on this.
But in 1964, a new study of cannabis was undertaken. It was in Israel that renewed interest in medical cannabis began, and again thanks to a young biochemist. Raphael Meshulam, 30 years old at the time. For him, it was an ideal research subject. Its principal active ingredient became his obsession.
This is a chromatography column, and this is the method we used almost 50 years ago to separate the constituents. And at that time, we found that there are two major constituents that we could separate.
THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, the compound that we found, our colleagues found that they work on monkeys. They have a psychoactivity in the monkey. And the second compound was cannabidiol, which had no activity in the monkey.
Isolated in a test tube, tetrahydrocannabinol. And the first experiment on humans remains legendary in the annals of research.
The next step was we decided to test the material we had on us, my family and my friends. So we did an experiment at home. My wife made a big cake with 10 milligrams of THC. So by using 10 milligrams, we had different effects. My wife was kind of sitting in a chair and dreaming. Another one said, I don't feel anything, but he would laugh every 15 seconds, start laughing, ha ha ha, stop. Another 15 seconds, ha ha ha, and laugh. Different completely. We had one case, unpleasant. She came afraid. 4 or 5 people with a relatively pleasant reaction, one person with an anxiety reaction, which is seen today very often.
Societies that allow marijuana have to realize from the professor's experiment that people are affected in different ways from marijuana. Fears are heightened. People have family histories of mental illness. People may have just psychological issues that can be heightened and brought to the surface basically when they smoke marijuana. So, you know, not everybody can handle smoking weed the same way. What may make a person just calm and relaxed, another person can become delusional or become psychotic from smoking the same strain of drug. So this is so important when people and society actually introduce, or governments introduce, marijuana as a recreational drug in their society. You cannot, and I call it the mask effect. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Mask with Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey, the mask actually brought out the personality of that person, whoever wore the mask. Their personality was heightened when the mask was on, and that's just like marijuana. You may smoke a joint and get affected in a whole different way by that joint, differently from someone else. You know, you may become so frightened of maybe a dog because you may have had a fear of dogs as when you were small, and you may see a dog and the dog may look like a monster after you smoke a joint. So, you know, and then you can actually go and run into traffic or do some foolishness. But this is what I'm talking about. You know, people are affected differently. Now, you cannot overdose with marijuana. You can't overdose to the point where you lose your breath and die. You know, you can probably get anxious and have rapid heartbeat and start to panic and feel like you're losing your breath, but you won't overdose on marijuana because the part of the brain, the medulla oblongata, is the stem at the base of the brain which deals with respiration, does not have any cannabinoid receptors there. So the cannabinoids, the THC, will not affect this area that deals with the respiratory with respiration, so you won't overdose on marijuana, which is good to note. But is marijuana a gateway drug? You know, smoking and alcohol have been known to be gateway substances that can lead to smoking to something else more potent, and marijuana has led to people being addicted to more potent substances. You know, this was one of their beginning drugs that they used, and they wanted more of a high or more of a way to forget their problems, and this led them to other more potent substances like maybe cocaine or heroin or ecstasy or LSD. But they started off either smoking and then drinking, and then they got a joint, and then they wanted more. And this, so it's it is possible that it is a gateway drug. You know, studies have shown this, documentaries have proven this. Fentanyl is killing people by the droves globally, and this is a concern. Just the thought of marijuana being laced with fentanyl is very scary. And this is another thing society has to think about. Will allowing marijuana as a recreational drug in society encourage a trend of marijuana being sold on the black market on the streets? Even though it's sold already in most places on the black market, it may become more encouraged when someone cannot possibly go to a dispensary or get a prescription. For some reason, this can encourage more of the black market sale of marijuana. And the thought of marijuana, of the possibility of it being laced with fentanyl, is very scary and is a concern.
Cases of teenagers using the dangerous combo are popping up. I spoke with a WashU doctor who is seeing this firsthand. Now that recreational marijuana for those 21 years and older is legal in Missouri, a new problem is coming to light. Marijuana laced with fentanyl. Dr. Michael Wenzinger, a staff psychiatrist at Washington University and a medical doctor, doesn't want to alarm people about this, but says parents need to have it on their radar.
In my clinical practice and among some of my peers, we're seeing more kids reporting they thought they were just smoking marijuana when drug screens showed fentanyl, and they would have toxicological or medical side effects consistent with that.
Dr. Wenzinger tells me the marijuana-fentanyl mixture is very recent, and it will be interesting to see what happens as the year goes on. Overall, marijuana use among teens is up.
When it comes to teenage use of any substance, their use tends to go up when public perception of risk goes down. So it's not a surprise that we're seeing way more marijuana use.
The latest data shows 30% of 12th graders are or have used marijuana. Doctors say the general feeling is that since it's sold in dispensaries, it's safe to consume.
This is sort of turning into an unintentional experiment of how does this high potency marijuana affect young people?
The pot sold today is much stronger than many teen parents might expect.
The marijuana that they might be used to from their childhood is not the kind of marijuana we're dealing with now. We're dealing with almost a whole different ballgame of potency.
Dr. Wenzinger says marijuana use is linked to more depression and anxiety, especially with a family history of psychosis. It worsens psychiatric conditions, impacts IQ, and is considered a gateway drug.
Fentanyl is an opioid. Now, opioids are a class of drugs that derive from or mimic natural substances found in the opium poppy plant. Now, opioids work in the brain to produce a variety of effects, including pain relief. As a class of substances, they act on opioid receptors to produce morphine-like effects. Imagine having marijuana wasted with an opioid, a synthetic opioid like fentanyl, or another synthetic opioid. This could be a lethal combination. There are also people lacing Xanax with synthetic opioids like fentanyl, and these combinations can be deadly. Opioid receptors, unlike cannabinoid receptors, are actually found in the brain, at the stem of the brain, the base of the brain, on the medulla oblongata that deals with respiration. So you can actually overdose on opioids, and having these combinations can be actually a deadly effect if taken in high doses and should not even be combined. So people are who matter most. Are countries really looking at out for the best interest of their society, or is it all about money? Are they thinking about the long-term effects on the brain of introducing this into society and allowing it to be decriminalized for recreational use or medicinal purposes to society members who are not even 25 yet? Countries are allowing this 18 and above, when the studies have shown that the brain has not fully developed until the age of 25. A judiciary report in the law term of 2017 to 2018 in Trinidad and Tobago reported that 9,553 marijuana-related cases came before the courts. 8,360 were for possession of marijuana alone. Could this be why they decided to decriminalize marijuana, and they say focus on where it matters most. So is this helping citizens when you're not looking at the underlying cause of why so many marijuana cases are being brought towards the courts? What's happening to your people? Why are so many people needing to use a drug? And is allowing it for recreational use helping them? You have to look at countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who have decriminalized 2 ounces of marijuana, the same as Jamaica, 2 ounces of marijuana. But St. Vincent and the Grenadines only have a little over 100,000 people, while Jamaica has 2.8 million people. Is this probably why the crime rate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines has risen? Is this the result of that? And what about the Bahamas? The Bahamas is introducing medicinal marijuana. Actually, this legislation is on the tables now to be introduced into their society. This small archipelago, a melting pot of cultures, how is it going to affect this small country who has had the stigma of being a drug trafficking spot for years? You know, they've fought so hard to overcome this, and yet now you have the buzz about marijuana. What about the cocaine epidemic of the early 1980s? You know, is this stigma going to be sort of creep back into the country? You know, will the introduction of marijuana for medicinal purposes create a buzz about introducing it for recreational purposes? Will this in turn be a gateway for more harder drugs, the introduction of cocaine or something harder for use on the black market on the streets? You know, will this buzz about drugs in the Bahamas be a negative stigma on the Bahamas? You have to think about all these things when your culture has had an issue with drugs in the past. You know, instead of following trends from a bigger, larger nation, look at your culture and how is it going to affect your culture. Is it smart to introduce this into your society that has had an issue with drugs in the past? How is this going to be regulated and funded? And how are people going to be trained? The cost of training. How many doctors are going to be allowed to write prescriptions? You know, there should not be many because, you know, it just holds them more accountable if it's less doctors, and it leaves leaves them not to be compromised. How's the cultivation going to be regulated and secured? How many people are going to be trained to cultivate this product? Places like Israel have been studying and cultivating and studying strains of marijuana for years. Is it better to just import medicinal marijuana from these countries that have dispensaries that have studied this product for years? You know, who is in charge of training of the various strains? You know, how many people are really understanding how marijuana affects the body and affects the system of various people? You know, many people may want to smoke marijuana or use marijuana recreationally and want to just get a prescription for nervousness or anxiety and depression, which actually is being allowed to be a condition that medicinal marijuana can be written for in prescription form. You know, for nervousness and depression, really, this is so broad, and many people are going to abuse this. You know, a person's background, their mental history, their psychological history, is this going to be looked into first before a prescription is written? Is it going to be recommended that they go to psychiatric or psychologist for treatment before a prescription is written? Guys, you know, when we wake up every morning, we have to realize that we have a natural innate system in our bodies, the endocannabinoid system. This is God created within us. Cannabinoid receptors are all throughout our bodies, working with the nervous system, in the nervous system and the brain, all throughout the bodies to regulate our emotions and our senses. You know, when the need arises, you know, if the need arises to calm us down, you can calm yourself down. You tap into your endocannabinoid system, and you can tap into this system without having to use outside sources, outside products to calm yourself down or to make you feel good. You just tap into the source of this system, which is God.